He gave without counting the cost, smiled even when it hurt. No one noticed how kindness turned into loneliness, and at some point he realized those who took could no longer be stopped. They said kindness was a virtue, that the world needs more good people. So I tried, not once, for a lifetime. I said yes when I wanted to scream no. I stayed when I should have walked away. I fixed messes I didn't cause. I gave what no one ever gave back, not because I didn't see what was happening, but because I couldn't stop. It doesn't happen all at once. The exhaustion, it creeps slowly. You think you're just tired. You need a day off, some sleep, maybe less stress. But no, you're not tired. You're depleted. That's the word no one teaches you. Depletion isn't cured by rest. You don't bounce back after a weekend or a good night's sleep, because it's not your body that's worn out. It's your soul. The part of you that kept giving and giving, believing that someday someone would see you, understand you, maybe even choose you like you always chose them. But the truth is hard. No one notices the strong one until she collapses. I've been a doctor, a counselor, a shoulder, a man people run to when the fire's already halfway through the house. And I've learned this: the kindest people burn out not because they're weak, but because they've been strong in silence for far too long. It's not about the acts. It's about the weight, the smile you force while swallowing resentment, the "I'm fine" you say while carrying 6 people emotionally, the patience that's praised while your boundaries are trampled. Kindness without limits turns into self-erasure, and that's the part no one tells you. They clap for your generosity, not realizing it's slowly killing you. They call you reliable while draining your last nerve. And the worst part? You believe them. You start thinking that your value lives only in what you offer, that love must be earned, that saying no is selfish, that disappointing others is the ultimate crime. Let me say this plainly. Being kind doesn't mean being available for abuse. And yes, emotional neglect is a form of abuse. So is chronic taking. So is guilt-drenched expectation. It took me decades to understand that not everyone deserves your softness. Some people come broken and leave you shattered. Some call it help, but what they really want is someone to bleed for them. And the kind ones, they always offer the vein. But here's the hardest truth. No one will stop you from sacrificing yourself. Not because they're evil, but because they're used to you being the one who always pays the emotional bill. People will take as long as you give. They won't question your silence. They won't investigate your smile. They won't ask what it costs you to keep being the good one. And the longer you delay that moment of truth, the more numb you become to your own erosion. Until one day you wake up and the person in the mirror is someone you no longer recognize. They took pieces, yes, but you handed them over first. That's not blame. That's responsibility. And there's a difference. The world won't save you from overgiving. The only person who can is you. But do you know what hurts even more than the burnout itself? There are moments, very specific ones, when helping is the worst thing you can do. It looks kind, but it destroys you. Or worse, it traps you in roles you can never escape. In Part 2, I'll tell you exactly when kindness becomes a silent killer, and why you need to stop before it's too late. There's a difference between helping and handing yourself over. No one explains that. They just say, be kind. But kindness without discernment? That's how people disappear from their own lives, smiling on the outside, rotting inside. I've watched it happen in my patients, in my friends, in myself. People who gave too much, too often, to the wrong people, and called it loyalty. No, that's not loyalty. That's self-betrayal dressed as virtue. Here's what I know now. There are 10 situations where helping isn't noble. It's dangerous, not just for your peace, but for your very identity. And if you're the kind that's always ready to rescue, these are the traps that will devour you whole. 1. When someone demands your help, but never asks how you are. They always have a crisis, a fire, an emergency. But not once have they sat with your silence. Not once did they notice the bags under your eyes. The people who never check on the strong ones are the ones who break them. 2. When they guilt you into saying yes. You're the only one I can count on. After all I've done for you. That's not love. That's manipulation, wearing a grateful face. Guilt is not a currency, and kindness should never come from fear. 3. When helping them means betraying yourself. You cancel your plans, skip sleep, lie to your partner, cover for their mess again. Helping should never require you to become someone you don't respect. 4. When they take help as a given, not a gift. They don't thank you. They expect you. You're a resource, not a human. That's not connection. That's exploitation. 5. When their pain becomes your responsibility. They collapse into you, but never try to stand. Every time you help, they fall harder. That's not compassion. That's codependency. 6. When the same pattern keeps repeating. You fix it, they break it. Again, and again, and again. They're not learning, because they don't have to. You're the safety net that makes growth optional. 7. When helping them hurts someone else you love, including yourself. You stretch yourself thin to be everywhere for everyone except yourself. Your kids wait, your partner sighs, your body aches, but you keep giving like you're made of endless light. You're not. 8. When they weaponize your kindness, they throw it back at you later. You didn't do enough. You did it wrong. The very thing you gave becomes another reason for blame. That's violence with a soft voice. 9. When you say yes just to keep the peace, it's easier than the argument, the look, the tension. So you swallow your no again. But peace that comes from silencing yourself is a war in slow motion. 10. When you don't want to help, but feel like you have to. That's the most dangerous moment, because what you give then isn't help. It's a piece of your soul torn out by obligation. I've made every one of these mistakes repeatedly, until I began to hate the sound of my own generosity, until I looked around and realized I was surrounded by people who liked me tired, people who smiled only when I said yes, people who vanished when I whispered no. Being kind is not the problem. Being unprotected in your kindness is what kills you. You can love, you can give, but not from a place of fear, not from emptiness, not because you don't want to be seen as selfish. That word, selfish, has been used to control people like you and me for centuries, to keep us docile, to keep us pouring from a cup that's been empty for years. The ones who deserve your help will never ask for it with guilt. They'll accept your boundaries. They'll listen to your no as respectfully as your yes. If they don't, walk away. But there's something deeper, darker. Even when we know all this, some of us still keep helping, still keep bending, still keep breaking. Why? In part 3, I'll tell you the real reason kind people keep burning out again and again, even when they know better. It's not about others. It's about the fear we carry inside. Are you also tired, even though you just wanted to be a kind person? then this video is no coincidence. Subscribe to the channel. Here they say out loud what you've been feeling for a long time but haven't dared to name. And in the comments, tell us, at what point did you realize that kindness was starting to destroy you? This is important not only for you. Your words can save someone else's silence. It wasn't compassion. It was fear. That's what I realized when I finally stopped. When the last favor felt like a wound, not a choice. For years I believed I was helping because I was good. But no, I was helping because I was terrified. Not of others, of rejection, of silence, of being left alone with my own unmet needs. That's the hidden engine, the fear of being unloved if we stop performing. See, they raise you to believe that love is earned, not felt, not given, earned, through behavior, through sacrifice, through becoming easy to love, safe to be around, never too loud, never too much. And if you grew up like that, always praised for being helpful, quiet, obedient, then you started to measure your worth in usefulness, not in joy, not in truth, in usefulness. So now, even as an adult, you confuse boundaries with cruelty. You think saying no is an attack. You feel guilty for resting. You apologize for things you didn't do. You feel selfish when you put yourself first, even when you're drowning. That fear runs deep. It's the fear of becoming invisible once you stop bleeding for others. It's the fear that without your service, you're disposable. Let me tell you something honest. People who love you for what you do will never love you for who you are. That's the difference no one taught us. So we confuse performance with intimacy. We stay in roles instead of relationships. We become necessary instead of loved. The problem is, when you're always the helper, you stop being seen as someone who needs help. You become a function, a support beam. No one thinks the beam needs a hug. It just holds the roof. I've watched people collapse quietly under that pressure. They don't scream. They don't complain. They just disappear, piece by piece, until nothing remains but their usefulness. And what's worse, they keep choosing the same people, the same dynamics, the same soul-deep fatigue, because that's where they feel familiar. Not safe, familiar. There's a difference. We stay in cycles that look like love, but feel like labor, because real love, healthy love, feels foreign. We don't trust it. We don't know what it's like to be loved without a task attached, without a price, without the unspoken contract. I'll be good so you don't leave me. Let me say something hard. If the only way you feel wanted is by being needed, then you've never been loved, only used softly. That realization breaks you, and then it sets you free. Once you stop being afraid of losing people who only stay for what you give them, you begin to find something else. You start to look for the ones who sit with your silence, who hear your no and still stay, who ask how you are and mean it. And you begin, slowly, to rebuild a self that isn't shaped by fear. No one tells you how lonely it gets at first, but loneliness that comes from truth is still better than the exhaustion of pretending. And here's where it gets even more real. Most people don't change, not because they can't, but because they don't know what life looks like without their role. In Part 4, I'll tell you what happens when you finally say no, and the world stops clapping. That's when you find out who you are, and who never really saw you to begin with. There comes a moment. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no explosion, no applause, no camera zooming in as the music swells. It's quiet. You just say no, maybe for the first time, maybe after 100 exhausted yeses. But this one is different. You mean it. You're not asking for permission. You're not hoping to be understood. You're done. And then it hits. The silence. Not peaceful silence. Not relief. The kind of silence that's loud with disappointment, with confusion, with the sudden absence of approval. People look at you like you've changed. They say, "You're not the same." They say, "What happened to you?" They say, "I guess you don't care anymore." But the truth is, you finally do care, just not about pleasing them. You care about yourself, about your limits, your peace. You care enough to stop letting everyone else write your story with your own ink. Still, it stings, because you've spent years building an identity around being helpful, selfless, so kind. And now that you're not bending, now that you're not available on command, what's left? Who are you when you're not performing? When no one needs saving? When no one's clapping? You discover things you didn't want to know, like who only loved you when you were convenient, who respected you only when you were silent, who disappears the moment you start choosing yourself. That's the grief no one prepares you for, the grief of losing the version of you that made others comfortable, not because you were fake, but because you were afraid. And once that mask falls off, you see it all, clear, sharp, unforgiving. How much you tolerated, how much you gave up, how many times you betrayed yourself in the name of peace that never belonged to you. You thought the no would bring you rest. It does. But first, it brings loss. You lose the illusion, the fake bonds, the conditional friendships, the performative gratitude. You sit in a kind of loneliness that feels unfamiliar. But underneath that ache is the first breath of freedom. It's real, it's raw, and it doesn't require applause. They won't celebrate you for choosing yourself, not at first, because your no forces them to face their own entitlement, and people hate mirrors when they're not ready to see. But something else happens. Slowly, you begin to attract different kinds of people, the ones who don't need to be rescued, the ones who don't flinch at your boundaries, the ones who value your presence, not your productivity. You stop being the fixer, you become whole, and then you look back, not in bitterness, but with clarity, and you think, this is who I was before I started begging for approval. The clapping stops, and so does the noise. What remains is a life that doesn't need to be earned. It just is. But here's the final turn most people never take. It's not enough to stop saying yes. You have to learn how to live differently, think differently. In Part 5, I'll show you what it actually means to build a life without fear, without guilt, without becoming hard, kind, but no longer for rent. They say healing feels good. Whoever said that never had to rebuild their entire identity from scratch. Real healing? It burns. Because you don't just let go of others, you let go of the version of yourself that kept you exhausted and acceptable. You realize you don't know how to live without guilt, without rushing to fix, without shrinking so someone else can breathe easier. And now that you've said no, now that you've stopped being available 24/7 to people who disappeared the second you needed something, what's next? That's the part no one tells you. The space after the chaos, the quiet after the applause stops. And in that quiet, a hard question surfaces. If I'm no longer the nice one, then who am I? It takes time. You fumble. You want to go back. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. Familiar pain always feels safer than unknown peace. But slowly, something shifts. You start noticing when you're being pulled. You start pausing before saying yes. You ask yourself, do I even want this? Or am I trying to be liked again? You stop showing up out of fear. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't actually listen. You begin saying, I'm not available for that. No excuses, no over-explaining, just truth. And it's terrifying, because being kind with boundaries feels wrong at first, like you're being cold, like you're letting people down, like you're becoming the person you used to judge. But that's the shame talking, the one they planted in you to keep you manageable. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness. It's codependence. It's a transaction you didn't agree to. It's smiling through disrespect, apologizing for your needs, carrying the weight of people who never ask how your back is holding up. You're allowed to love and still say no. You're allowed to help and still rest. You're allowed to show up for others without setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. But let me be clear, this isn't about becoming hard. It's not about building walls or walking through life guarded and bitter. That's not healing. That's hiding. The point is to become soft with a spine, to remain kind but rooted, to be generous but not rentable. You're not a rescue unit. You're not an emotional trash bin. You're not the background character in other people's stories. You're a human being, deserving, full, complete. Even when you're not useful, even when you're not fixing, even when you're simply existing. And when you finally live from that place, people sense it. The ones who only came for your usefulness vanish. The ones who stay, they're not drawn to what you can do for them. They're drawn to who you are when you're no longer exhausted. That's the shift. That's the freedom. Not loud, not flashy, just a quiet strength that says, I'm still kind, but I'm not afraid anymore. But before you move on, there's one more truth you need to face. One final realization that changes everything, because it forces you to forgive yourself for all the years you gave away too much. In Part 6, I'll show you how to live with that past without shame, and finally rest in peace, not exhaustion, not just healing, but wholeness. You don't just walk away from years of overgiving and become a different person overnight. There are pieces of you still standing in old places, habits that whisper, go back, memories that ask, was I really wrong for caring? It's hard to forgive yourself for the version of you who kept saying yes while breaking inside. Harder still to forgive yourself for how long you stayed. But staying too long doesn't make you weak. It means you were loyal in a world that rewards detachment. It means you kept believing when others were busy calculating. And that's not a flaw. That's proof that your heart still worked, even when it was bleeding. But there comes a point where you must stop repenting for being kind, even if your kindness wasn't always wise, even if your love was handed to people who never deserved it. Because dragging your old self like a punishment is just another form of burnout, another version of overgiving, this time to regret. You don't need to keep paying for being who you were. There's a softer way, one without shame, one that allows you to rest, not just physically, but emotionally, to sit in your own company without guilt gnawing at your silence. And it begins when you stop trying to rewrite your past and start honoring it. Because that past, flawed, messy, aching, is what brought you here, to the truth, to the shift, to this moment where you're no longer surviving by being useful. You're alive because you've remembered you matter, not for what you give, not for how well you carry others, but because you exist. You won't get applause for this. There will be no parade for finally putting yourself first. But the quiet that follows is different now. It no longer sounds like abandonment. It sounds like safety. This is where you return to yourself, not the broken version, not the pleasing version, the real one, the one who can love fully without leaking, who can show up without surrendering her soul, who can give without bleeding. And you'll still be kind, not because you're scared, because it's who you are, by choice, not by pressure. You'll stop explaining your boundaries. You'll stop apologizing for your peace. You'll stop chasing people who only clapped when you were exhausted. And then, in the middle of an ordinary day, you'll feel it, that deep breath, that stillness inside, that unfamiliar calm that finally feels like home. You'll know this is what it feels like to rest without apology. No more proving, no more rescuing, no more being everything to everyone. Just you, whole, quiet, free. Now breathe, not because you earned it, but because you're allowed to. You've always been allowed.